4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Lend-lease going, so we were able to receive these vehicles. We were just running out of money. We're able to receive the vehicles basically on the Never Never. In fact, it was only about 5 years ago we finished paying them back the money that we got for the kit. Now the M3 sees action in North Africa with British forces. This to tow either damaged vehicles off the battlefield like a recovery vehicle. Yesterday, all American tanks were named after Civil War generals, not by the Americans, but by the British. Now, why the Americans built the ground? Sensibly turn around and say, hang on a second, why don't you come in with our own tank building program and buy those tanks? So Britain actually paid for the and it almost, you can hear that actually to dig it out of any problems that it might find in the ditch, but rather forms a stable platform for the unit. When it's firing, it's done. Coming into the arena now is what the Americans wanted to build. Once they've got the factory built, the skills to cast bigger turrets. And that was the issue. They wanted the same gun that was on the ground, 75mm, but what we've got there now is it in a fully rotating turret instead of being placed in the hull. An enormous scale, and each factory that built Shermans, even though they've got a common baseline, everyone is slightly different because of the skills available at that particular factory. You can see there's two types of Sherman driving around at the moment, in the sense that you've got one with a cast hull with rounded edges, one that's welded together, and that's another one of these issues with different factories. An M4 A1 Sherman has a cast hull, an M4 Sherman is just welded. They don't have the same radial engine, but because they have to build so many, we end up with 4 engine types. So the M4A2 version, that has a twin diesel engine, which every Sherman tank you look at will look different to the one next to it. And as the war progresses, they improve things such as the suspension, the track width, and a bit later in the war they add a slightly more powerful gun, a 76mm gun, but again at the same time, we've ended up this one then moves on to a diesel engine version of it, powering it. But they purposely picked, when Vickers were making the Valentine, they picked components that were already available and were known to be reliable. So the suspension had already been used on an earlier British tank.
This particular tank was rescued in bits, bought by someone called John Pearson. It's still looked after by his family. The reenactors, documentaries, film, the two Shermans have been used in movies. That really, again, it doesn't always have to be 100% original to still do the job, and certainly in the future I've got a feeling we'll be seeing more replicas appearing over time. Certainly you saw earlier in the battle there's up to 3 German replica based on an modern armoured personnel carrier parts. Looks the part, does the job, and really good from that. This was a version that was made to fit something called the multi-bank engine in. It needed a bit more room. The wheel spaces between the road wheels are slightly larger. And again, these are subtle differences. Even though the overall tank had very similar specifications, also a 75mm gun. If you know where you're looking, you can see each factory did slightly different things. Many different elements to consider when you're designing a tank. One of the things that's always interested me is tank profile as well. When you look at these front on, they do seem to... It's because with the radial engine in the back, think of a big round engine, the drive shaft goes all the way through the tank to the gearbox at the front, and the crew's got to be above that. That makes the tank a little bit higher. I'm not sure if we are going to see one of those Soviet, we will later on, I imagine. Particularly important in a featureless combat area where there's nothing to hide behind. Now, if you watch some of the documentaries, read some of the books, lots of myths about the idea if it was hit, it would go straight up in flames, it was a Tommy cooker, etc. All utter tosh. The Sherman caught fire, but not because of its petrol engines. It caught fire because the ammunition was exposed inside.
So far, successful recovery. We don't have to ask for an awful lot of people out the audience to give it a push. So, be able to pull that one off on its, take it back to where it's in its field. Or I'm assuming they're going to do that, whether or not they decide to actually just take it and hide it away from it. Around the world, you can see that classic Soviet design. It's a frying pan shaped turret, upturned. That gives it good, better ballistic protection. It has a powerful 100mm gun, so much more powerful than the World War II 85mm on the T-34-85. It's got aggressive track. It doesn't have rubber on the track. It rips up the road surface when it goes around. But again, in the Soviet Union, they don't care about that. It faces the enemy, and during their production, they end up finding ways to put bigger guns on the vehicles.
Yes, the naming of tanks interests me. Forgive me, David, you'll have to suggest that I get out a bit more. Do we know what T stands for? After it's the year of introduction into service. So with the Soviets, it's a T for, in essence, a type tank. Is the year? It's a relatively simple system, but what makes it even more complex is the Chinese copied Soviet T tanks, and they became what's called a type tank. So a Type 54 is basically a copy. In fact, they actually call it a Type 62 is a copy of a Type 54 tank. So some of these tanks were made in satellite countries, in other words, Poland, Czechoslovakia, but when Russia
some from Britain too. This is the first tank they designed that goes into service 10 years later in 1965. It's called the Leopard, and this is the Leopard 1 driving around now. Now the Germans came to a very different conclusion than the Western Allies at the end of the T-35 ton mark, and that's, we'll hear that MTU diesel driving around at the moment, sounding very, very impressive, making that Leopard tank go around at speed. And flying the Union flag, of course, we have the AS-90, which in terms of nomenclature stands for Advanced System for the 90s. And when it was designed by Vickers Shipbuilding and Engineering Limited, they predicted it would still be in service in 2030, which wasn't a bad idea because they had no idea, of course, that there would be a war between Ukraine and Russia, and 12 were sent over as spares for spare parts to the target, objects that the detachable crew can't see. The AS-90 will hold around 30 rounds and can range with a high explosive stance. And if you get the chance, between now and the end of the show when it's parked up, do please go around the back and have a look at the space. Okay, we're going to start from 5 all the way down to 4. 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Oh, I don't quite know how to call that one. That's almost a draw.
Mark 11. What, Harry? Good thing, Harry. With all the dust, you can't see if the engine's burning oil.